Mr. Biden is going to Saudi Arabia after he said he will never talk to the Saudis to beg for more cheaper oil so that the Russians will not get this revenue stream to continue the war. So these are examples where think tanks and the media are playing a key role in educating our policymakers, decision makers, political elites, and broad public, and educating them about specific issues such as, let's say, building more nuclear reactors in Europe, or redirecting American liquefied natural gas for the European markets, or why we should not be as nasty as we were to our Gulf friends. Just a couple of examples. In terms of experience, we worked on issues in Central Asia, Ukraine, the Caucasus, a little bit on Africa, a little bit on Latin America, and as I said, Eurasia writ large, Eastern Europe, etc. And in terms of our networks, these are the networks in the media, in the think tank world primarily. We do not do lobbying, but we help clients to select the proper American lobbying firm that fits the client. It is very important. So I think I should stop here, and I'll be happy to answer questions. The only thing is I have another appointment to go to, so by about 1:15 I have to leave.
I promise we're not going to ask you about other appointment, but we'll give the floor to the David Baxter, and then David, if you could share your view about future, and thank you, Ariel, for such big introduction of your previous experience. Really, it is important to talk about future, I think, because you just mentioned about opportunities that for lobbying firm, and then either we're talking about emerging markets and finding new clients in emerging markets, or educating West about emerging markets. I think it's two different issues. So where we're concentrating our efforts, and obviously we can work in both places, but I think it is important to divide your client there. And David, what do you think?
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it. I was sort of a last-minute addition, but I don't feel like I was left out. I feel honored that somebody reached out to me at such short notice. The area that I've been very involved in is the promotion of public-private partnerships, which I think are critical when we talk about partnerships between the public and the private sector. These are arrangements, these are more formal ones, these are not philanthropic arrangements, but these are contractual arrangements between the public and the private sector to provide services, introduce innovation, also to provide alternative financing to projects which might never happen because governments don't have the resources, and then cumulatively leveraging the resources of both the public and the private sector. And this does require a very, very strong debate between the public and the private sector. In many countries, the public sector is used to just issuing procurements. It doesn't consult with the private sector, doesn't even bother to find out if the private sector has the capability or the interest in participating in projects. And so the result of that is that many times large procurements for critically needed infrastructural services go unanswered because the private sector is not interested in them, or they don't have the resources. In the beginning of the pandemic in 2020 in May, I reached out to a very extensive network that I have and asked them, what are the impacts of the pandemic on your public-private partnerships that you're involved in? I got responses from 70 countries, which was quite a good response, from PPP practitioners, both in the government and the private sector. And they said that, we are not really changing our focus on the types of projects that need to be done. The priorities are, and they listed, and I've got them here, energy, and by that being renewable energies, because there's a realization that we can't keep on relying on fossil fuels forever. Healthcare, which was pretty obvious because during the pandemic, the healthcare systems were falling apart all over the world. Even here in the United States, we had a catastrophe. and then transportation, but not the old type of transportation, more transportation that was focused on smart type projects, innovative projects. And then what happened was that over time, this debate evolved. The United Nations Economic Commission for Europe has a PPP Center of Excellence in Geneva, and they have launched an initiative, and it's a very nice change. It's a paradigm shift. Instead of just doing public-private partnerships as procurement methods for large infrastructure and relationships between the government and the private sector, they've launched an initiative called People First PPPs. And what they're looking at is leveraging PPPs also as a development tool or a development mechanism. So what is the focus of this? It's helping countries to use public-private partnerships in partnership, and I want to stress this, with the private sector to help countries achieve their sustainable development goals. This is critical. It's also now with the European taxonomy and the Securities and Exchange Commission here in the United States beginning to emphasize ESG. This is also becoming a consideration. And so what we have is a new approach, which is not just focusing on the old situations of value for money, that was a big focus of projects, but also value for people. And we need to be honest, when we're doing projects, we're actually doing it for people. We're not doing it just for the sake we can do it. And the other is value for the future, which ties in very closely to what we're talking about. And value for future being another term, future-proofing projects. So this is introducing considerable amounts of demands or requirements or understandings for sustainability and resilience. This has resonated very well with the international community. And so even United States-based organizations that are focused on international development, international aid, we know who they are. I'm sure you've all heard of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, USAID, Department of State, Department of Commerce, and they, in partnership with organizations such as the Global Infrastructure Hub, which is a G20 organization that was set up, and in the Global Center on Adaptation, which is another spin-off created in Europe, are looking at how can we leverage these partnerships? How can we engage with the private sector? So what is happening is it's kind of almost a reverse lobbying, because the private sector has always been pounding at the doors of government and trying to get it to be heard. Now some governments are pounding at the doors of the private sector and saying, we need you as partners, we need your insights. And this has, become really prevalent in emerging markets. I do a lot of work in the Middle East, and I've supported the governments of Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the Islamic Republic of Egypt. And this language of people first, private sector engagement, ESGs is becoming, more and more important. Just this week, in partnership with the World Bank, the government of Egypt has launched a whole new initiative for sustainable and green PPPs. So it's not just PPPs as they existed. So they're going to take their procurement laws, their enabling environment, and they're going to introduce a green element to it. And you're seeing this also happening in certain states in the United States, and definitely with the current administration, they're very focused on sustainability resilience. I think what we are doing is we're moving away from when we use the word green. It's not tree hugging anymore, but it's survivable or survivability strategies. Because if you just see what's happened in the Western United States with running out of water, massive fires, which is happening in the Gulf states of the United States, with hurricanes that were 1,000-year events becoming every year events now, and that we have to look at these factors and consider them. And again, it is so important that the private sector is engaged. I have worked for the public and the private sector. When I worked for the public sector, I was not paid to be innovative, let's be honest. I was paid to do my job according to the manual, the guidelines, and the procedures and policies. The private sector is different because they are very competitive, and for them to survive, they have to engage strategies that will encourage sustainability, resilience, future-proofing. Another thing that is also important is that we have to introduce transparency and competitiveness in procurements. Because unless this is done, the best stay away and the worst get the contracts all the time. And this happens worldwide. in the United States and you name it, Europe, Africa, where I originally come from. I know I don't look typically African, but I'm a very proud African from South Africa. And so we are working, at finding ways to improve sustainability, improve transparency, because then it gives you that value for money, that value for the future, that value for people that you're looking for, and transparency, which ensures that the best are chosen. Companies that are embracing this are also pushing governments to set out their guidelines, their practices, so that there's a standard approach. And this ties down, and this is the last statement I'll make, is about the whole idea of unsolicited proposals. This is a red herring for many organizations. So in the situation, typically the government initiates a procurement, but what is happening now that many private sector institutions are going to governments and saying, we've got a great idea, we've got a great practice, a great policy, new technology, we would like to engage with you. Governments are trying to find ways to accept this, but making sure that there's still competition, because otherwise it becomes just a sort of a how would you call it, just another one-sided event, and we don't want this to happen. So what I would just end off with saying is that there are great things happening. The pandemic is not a disaster. In actual fact, I think it's been a great generator, of new innovative ideas. And then also the war in the Ukraine has just made countries around the world very, very aware of how fragile their supply systems are, the sources are, the economies are. And with that in mind, I'll just make one little statement that I'm working very closely with the Ukrainian PPP unit in Kiev. We're working with the head of it. And through an organization that I work with, the World Association of PPP Units and Professional Practitioners, we have created a task group, and we've offered our services to the government of Ukraine to ensure that there are new ways of introducing and doing infrastructure projects and service projects better. We've heard in the United States, let's build back better. This should be also, let's build back better in the Ukraine as well. So what we're doing is identifying new priorities, project pipelines of viable projects that are commercially and economically viable, which will attract responsible ESG-focused investors to build a better world. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Great speech. And yeah. So Felix, please share.
Great.
Your
Thank you so
ideas.
much. Greetings from Ghana, a very formidable and democratic state, which has become the gateway to Africa and the destination as well. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to such a very important program. And lobbying, which is a specific component of every institution's communication strategy, is gradually becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when I was checking, I realized that for the past 2 years now, the US alone spent close to 2.5 million on lobbying activities. And this chunk of expenditure is coming from businesses and corporate actors that are trying to influence decisions, starting from international trade, talking about other policies, and an agreement. And one critical aspect of this is that political scientists recognize lobbying as one of the legitimate, uses in democracy, because it gives the citizens, and corporate institutions, including groups and labor unions, for their voices to be heard in the political arena. But things have changed because of COVID. And now that the influence of game has changed, the rules must also change so that it can reflect on this 21st century's, realities. COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted how globalization and digitalization are reshaping our planet. So there is the need to revamp our lobbying or advocacy rule to be able to reflect on these particular activities. Now, the realities include rapid technological change, global competition for influence, and citizens who demand higher standards of integrity and inclusiveness in policy making. Because if you really check things, you realize that in so many countries, you realize that the citizens are even losing trust in our institutions. So COVID-19 has really, really tested our government to see how best they can respond to those kind of issues, which has been the biggest after the Second World War. And right now we have about $15 trillion that has really cost the economy because of the COVID-19. And the recovery plan is going to be so great and is going to put a lot of spotlight on lobbyists. And for us to make this industry very effective, we need relationship, we need effective budget, we need effective regulations and database policies. I checked and I realized that the first set of global lobbying guideline was created in 2010 following the 2008-2009 financial crisis. A decade on, many countries were able to at least put things in place, but others, they are not making so much progress in that concerning the lobbying risk. And you realize that where there are even rules, we have some avenues for abuse. And so there is the need that at this particular time, tougher regulations to be able to control the industry. And if you look at other parts of the world, what is emerging now is what we call citizen lobbying. When this thing started back in the media time, everybody said, look, these guys don't mind them. I mean, people just take their mobile phones and then put things out there. But now it has catch up. And it's the same thing that we are experiencing now in this 21st century, where anybody with smart devices could just go for some review, put it out there just to lobby, a policy as to whether it is good or not. Sometimes these are falsified informations. And therefore, there is the need for us to be able to make sure that first, technology and digitization has transformed influence from handshake to hashtag. And we got to utilize all those things as citizen lobbying has also become the order of the day. There must also be the need for influencers themselves. Most of the time, concentrate on a larger market. Now we have a few players that have been concentrating on, where the NGOs, the foundations, the think tanks, people don't really, include the activities in whatever normally that happens. I want to say that transparency is key in whatever, lobbying activities or public, affairs activities that goes on in every sectors of the economy, and so that we can have a broader stakeholder, engagement to ensure that all the things that are happening globally, there are so many things that are happening, but we could be able to venture into it and make sure that lobbying or GR activities become so legitimate for others.
All right, Felix, thank you. So I like very much from hashtag to handshake, or actually from handshake to hashtag, I think, but it's great. We'll try to answer questions if we have them from internet community, as we're talking about hashtags now. So please prepare them if you have them. And in the meantime, I'm very happy to invite Mihael Cigler to speak. So this is your talking stick.
Thank you very much. Thank organizers to having me here, and also opportunity to actually to speak and to address you. I give you a higher price and that it will go. This is our problem. That's why we wish to have all secure, how to say, pipelines out from Russia, right? It's always the same price. So if there will be that the prices will be right for you investments, because a lot of refineries and so are now also adjusting to this market. Hydrogen is important. It will be for transport. It will be for airports. It will be for buses, for public transportation. And it is actually also the solution, not just for electrifying the European Union. If you ask the BMW, we said, we have to be more ambitious, that there will be more electric cars. What does it mean? It means that they will simply, in Northern Africa, they wish to put solar plant and then, import all the energy out from the Northern Africa. So there are a lot of studies how they wish to do it. So I say, energy, it is a big opportunity because it's opportunity for Germany, for our countries, and so our country, Slovenia, it was 70 to 80% dependent on Russian gas, and now, how to say, we traded recession because we believe it will be coming, right? It will be affecting also increases of prices, supply chain, everything. And Europe, in this respect, is a victim, right? And of course, that is opportunity that we stand together, we lobby for the things that we grow and we have same energy solutions. COVID. During the COVID times, also as a presidency of Slovenia to the EU, we actually have a project which is called eHealth. We know that people couldn't, travel, couldn't get a good medical service at the hospitals. In some countries, you had special COVID hospitals. In some, you had just the departments and so. So for e-digitalization and for that you do a personal meeting, the MD or general practitioner or the family doctor more with their patients regarding their symptoms, and this telemedicine is very important. So there are a lot of governments are still, in the process, because they have to re-establish their health care system, and digitalization is a big issue, and e-health in the EU, and with the good, IT solutions is just waiting that someone will come and invest, especially on our side where we are from the Central and Eastern, countries. So that's what we see as well. And then, of course, when we have the outside of the EU, those are the countries which are surrounding us, like Bosnia, also Serbia, and those who are they're not supporting the sanctions towards Russia, and they should, right? But they are not a part of the EU, right? And is that actually to speak as well, to get them on Western dialogue, to lobby that, and how they could gain out from the Western as well, Western investments and all those things. So here I will stop, and then I'm ready for questions.
Thank you. What I noted that in common, we all agree that crisis is an opportunity for somebody, and we talked a lot about energy, but at the same time, I'd like to add a little bit about logistics, that the map is changing of the world. It's not just political map, logistical map is changing. So there are a lot of opportunities for not just emerging markets, not just for transport logistic companies, but for lobbyists and the government relations specialists, because I spent part of my life bringing container traffic from container transit from Japan and Korea into Trans-Siberian Railway. I can see now that obviously even the huge opportunity is lost now, and nobody is going to in the near future probably send containers from Far East to Europe through Trans-Siberian Railway. There are many other routes which are changing now, and it's not just for railway transportation, but it's for aviation as well. We do have a lot of questions and few minutes to answer questions from the internet, and I'll try to choose the most particular questions and very simple ones. And then the first question, if Felix, you don't mind, I'll ask you. What is the name of the largest lobbyist companies in Ghana?
For Ghana, we don't have a well.
That's why I said it's a very simple question.
We don't have a well-developed lobbying system like that of the US. And so it's some kind of an individual kind of thing that people do. And even if you go back to the country and then you mention lobbyists, people look at you as some way as if you are doing an illegitimate kind of business. So it's not, there's no regulations, governing that industry in Ghana, and we don't have such robust, system. So it's an individual.
You mentioned that there is no system in place yet, but so just I wanted this is one of the questions which we have got through Zoom, and there are many questions on Facebook. I can't ask them, unfortunately, but thank you.
So
I think it shows that
gray area. So I mean, it could be explored.
Exactly, great opportunity, I think, for this. Talking about think tanks in US, would you like to add anything? Question to David. You mentioned think tanks, and we have got quite a few questions about think tank of lobbying community. Ariel, if you wish, you can help David.
The think tank purpose is to articulate policy. It's not to lobby. The lobbyists are for lobbying, and they register and they do what they do. Now, by the law, 20, if I remember correctly, 20% of think tank activity can be done as lobbying. My organization doesn't do lobbying. The organizations I worked with before do not do lobbying. There's a clear line. However, having said that, the think tank is a 501c3 paragraph 501c3 of the tax law. 501c4 can be a lobbying organization. So if somebody has an agenda that they want to promote, they can register an organization relatively cheap and relatively easy in order to promote their agenda. And in that case, they can go and lobby. This will not be recognized as a tax-free contribution. So you have to work with an appropriate law firm that has the expertise in the lobbying realm in order to be within the scope of the law. I am a lawyer in a past life. I don't practice in the United States, and I'm not dispensing legal advice. Having said that, there are numerous other laws that regulate what individuals and entities can do. And my advice to everybody is to follow the law and not cross the lines. If they do, that will be upon their head.
We have a question from the audience, right?
So did you ever tell this to General Allen at the Brookings Institution?
I never met General Allen.
And it seems to me that he's got a bit of trouble now as a secretly lobbying for, he's being accused of secretly lobbying for Qatar while he was the head of.
I think you and I read the same newspapers. I would also point out that in this country, a person is innocent until proven guilty, especially somebody like General Allen.
Especially the Democrats.
Right. Okay. Shall we?
Our colleague here wants to.
Yeah, I can see, but I'll give the floor to the internet first, and then I'll come back to you. Just and yeah, hashtags. Question to Michael about EU. In what EU countries lobby is legal? Just because we are probably two of us only from Europe, that's why I don't have a shake.
Lobbying is legal all over the European Union. As we know that we have two lobbying centers in the world, right? The most important one. One is Washington, D.C., where we are today, and the second is Brussels. And we know that there are about 64,000 lobbyists, lobbying firms as well registered within the Brussels. And how to say, the lobbying world is even increasing. I think it's 15% each year that goes up, even in the times of the COVID. From our country, I'm the chairman of the Slovenian National Association for Legal Lobbying. We have, and I'm just saying as, how to say, example, we have a strict lobbying law. We think that we have one of the strictest within the EU countries. So we have an anti-corruption committee, which actually has the list of the lobbyists, and you have to register with this. And in this register, it's about 83 registered lobbyists. I think there are more, and there should be more. But the thing is that those are professional lobbyists. Whereas in Brussels, for example, it's transparency register, where also, as Katarina was saying in the beginning, you have religious associations, you have, you know, car associations, you have, I don't know, different, everyone who wish to actually to access the European Parliament and wish to lobby is actually registered within European Commission and within the Parliament. So, of course, we have strict rules. How we do it, we are now, we have just a new government in Slovenia, and I'm also in the group which is preparing with some constitutional professors, and one of my visits in US is as well actually to exchange some ideas regarding our lobbying profession, what would be good, what not. But we will introduce in this law, as you have a bar chamber with attorneys at law, and attorneys are actually, they're not lobbying, but they are providing services for the clients in the front of the court. So we are, as a professional lobbyist, providing our services in the parliament and actually within the government. So for me, this is the distinction. So we'll have what we are lobbying in Slovenia, that we will have our, how to say, chamber of lobbyists. And it means that we'll be self-regulated. We wish to have certified lobbyists, that they will know what they do, what is their ethics, and if someone will be violating rules, we'll go after him and we'll expel. So in this respect, we'll go. And as well, what we wish to have, it is in the National Assembly, we requested that we have a room for lobbyists. If the journalists are having their own rooms, and the politicians, and we are the lobbyists, and this is democracy, and wish to enter, we wish to have our own room so that we will meet the legislators there. And we said that we will fight this to the end. For us, lobbying, I know it's, you say negative word, or governmental affairs, someone use it, or public affairs, but as we have lobbying, and I'm proud to be a lobbyist, right? That is the word which we will use.
Oh,
thank
you.
Yeah.
Actually, just the question, David, I'm going to ask you, because internet asked questions, and then we had questions from the audience, and I have a lot of questions. May I ask just one, a very simple one? How to choose lobbyists? You're a specialist in procurement, so right. This is what you said in your bio, and so it's very. I'm a very simple person and simple question.
So I would tie that, specifically to where I'm heavily involved in unsolicited proposals, because in a sense that's a form of, I would say, direct lobbying for specific types of projects. And what is important that I think for both parties, that the company's reputation needs to be really determined through due diligence. So when there's these lobbying organizations that come along and say, we have a great project for you, you need to find out a bit of the history, not just the history of the company, but also the history of the office holders, because what happens is so many companies get disbarred by organizations like the World Bank and that for performing. They change their name, and the same bad guys or operators are then just there under a new name and trying to get in. So this needs to be addressed. The other is, in the sense of that when lobbying takes place, specifically for unsolicited proposals, I think it's quite fair for the government to at least set some ground rules, and say it's going to be a competitive and transparent procurement if we believe in transparency and competition, and also that we are only going to allow certain types of lobbying for certain types of projects which are identified as national priorities and national needs, because if we don't do that, then governments get so overwhelmed.
David, sorry. So you're talking about process and procedures. Does it matter either they're successful, these lobbyists, or not? And because again, I'm coming from government relations. To me, it's a bit different. And when you're choosing government relations specialist, then you're obviously choosing somebody who has got not just great bio and a big company, but did something really effective for the client.
Yeah, so
And you didn't mention anything like this.
So I think the metric for success for a lobbyist is if they actually get something to happen. I would say that sometimes it might not happen as quickly as you think, but it does introduce new ideas, new opportunities to governments, which then over time, I think, change the milieu, the thought patterns, the things that are happening, and that can be an influence. So depending on which side, you know, if you're a high-powered lobby and you promise to push something through for a company and you don't do it, that's considered failure, but it might introduce some new ideas as well. I just wanted to make one very quick comment on, you know, the think tanks. I think what's happening with the policies, think tanks are great at coming with policies, less great at coming up with strategies, and even worse when it comes to implementation. And so what I think
depends who. You have to go to the right thing.
So I think what is happening with a lot of think tanks is they're starting to move away from being think tanks and becoming do tanks to actually do something, because that's what's more important.
All right.